Chapter 13 Marlenus, Ubar of Ar. I set my course for Gor of Ar, carrying in my saddle-pack the trophy that was now, at least to me, worthless. It had done its work. Its loss to Ar had already riven an empire, and for the time at least had guaranteed the independence of Gor of Ar and her hostile city sisters. Yet my victory, if victory it was, brought me no satisfaction. My mission might have been concluded, but I did not rejoice. I had lost the girl I had loved, cruel and treacherous though she might have been. I took the Tarn high, to bring a circle of some 200 pasangs or so under my view. In the far distance I could see the silver wire that I knew must be the great Vosk. I could see the abrupt shift from the grassy plains to the margin of desolation. From this height I could look down on a portion of the Voltai range, with its arrogant reddish heights, as it faded away to the east. To the southwest I could see dimly the evening light reflected from the spires of Ar, and to the north, approaching from the Vosk, I could see the glow from what must be thousands of cooking fires, the knight's camp of Par-Kor. As I was drawing on the two-strap to guide the Tarn to Gor of Ar, I saw something I did not expect to see, something directly below which startled me. Shielded among the crags of the Voltai, invisible except from directly above, I saw 4 or 5 small cooking fires, such as might mark the camp of a mountain patrol, or a small company of hunters, perhaps after the agile and bellicose Gurian mountain goat. The long-haired spiral-horned ver, or more dangerously the laurel, a tawny leopard-like beast indigenous to the Voltai, and several of Gor's ranges, standing on incredible 7 feet high at the shoulder, and feared for its occasional hunger-driven visitations to the civilized plains below. Curious, I dropped the Tarn lower, not willing to believe the fires belonged to either patrol or to hunters. It did not seem likely that one of Ar's patrols would be presently provoked in the Volta, nor did it seem likely the fires below would be those of hunters. As I dropped lower, my suspicions became confirmed. Perhaps the men of the mysterious camp heard the beating of the Tarn's rings. Perhaps I had been outlined for an instant against one of Gor's 3 circling moons. But suddenly the fires all disappeared, kicked apart in a flash of sparks, and the glowing embers were smothered almost immediately. Outlaws, I supposed, or perhaps deserters from Ar. There would be many who would leave the city to seek the comparative safety of the mountains. Feeling I had satisfied my curiosity, and not wanting to risk a landing in the darkness, where a spear might dart from any shadow, I drew back on the one-strap and prepared to return at last to Gor of Ar, whence I had departed several days, an eternity before. As the Tarn wheeled upward, I heard the wild, uncanny hunting cry of the laurel, piercing the dusk from somewhere in the peaks below. Even the Tarn seemed to shiver in its flight. The hunting cry was answered from elsewhere in the peaks, and then again from a farther distance. When the laurels hunt alone, it hunts silently, never uttering a sound till the sudden roar that momentarily precedes its charge. The roar calculated to terrify the quarry into a fatal instant of immobility. But tonight the pride of laurels was hunting, and the cries of the 3 beasts were driving cries, herding their prey, usually several animals, toward the region of silence, herding them in the direction from which no cries would come, the direction in which the remainder of the pride awaited. The light of the 3 moons was bright that night, and in the resultant exotic patchwork of shadows below, I caught sight of one of the laurels, padding softly along, its body almost white in the moonlight. It paused, lifted its wide, fierce head, some 2 or 3 feet in diameter, and uttered the hunting scream once more. Momentarily it was answered, once from about 2 parasangs to the west, and once from about the same distance to the southwest. It appeared ready to resume its pace when suddenly it stopped, its head absolutely motionless, its sharp pointed ears tense and lifted. I thought perhaps he had heard the Tarn, but he seemed to show no awareness of us. I brought the bird somewhat lower, in slow, long circles, keeping the laurel in view. The tail of the animal began to lash angrily, and it crouched, holding its long, terrible body close to the ground. It then began to move forward, swiftly but stealthily, its shoulders hunched forward, its hindquarters almost touching the ground, its ears lying back flat against the sides of its wide head. As it moved, for all its speed, it placed each paw carefully upon the ground, first the toes, and then the ball of the foot, as silently as the wind might bend grass, in a motion that was as beautiful as it was terrifying. Something unusual was apparently happening. Some animal must be trying to break the hunting circle. One would suppose that the laurel might be unconcerned with a single animal escaping its net of noise and fear, and would neglect an isolated kill in order to keep the hunting circle closed. But that is not true. For whatever reason, the laurel will always prefer ruining a hunt, even one involving a quarry of several animals, to allow a given animal to move past it to freedom. Though I suppose this is purely instinct on the laurel's part, it does have the effect over a series of generations of weeding out animals which, if they survived, might transmit that intelligence, or perhaps the erratic running patterns, to their offspring. As it is, when the laurel loses its hunt, the animal which escapes are those which haven't tried to break the circle, those which allow themselves to be herded easily. Suddenly, to my horror, I saw the quarry of the laurel. It was a human, moving with surprising alacrity over the rough ground. To my astonishment, I saw it wore the ceremonial yellow crements of a sufferer of darkosis, that virulent, incurable wasting disease of gore. Without even bothering to think, I seized my spear, and dragging harshly on the forestrap, brought the Tarn into a sharp, abrupt descent. The bird struck the ground between the diseased victim and the approaching laurel, but rather than risk casting my spear from the safe but unsteady saddle of the Tarn, I leapt to the ground, just as the laurel, furious that it had been discovered, uttered the paralyzing hunting roar, and charged. For an instant I could not move, quite literally. Somehow the shock of that great wild cry gripped me in a steel fist of terror. It was uncontrollable, and immobility as much of a psychological reflex as the jerking of a knee or the blinking of an eye. Then as swiftly as it had come, the nightmarish instant of immobility passed, and I was able to set my spear to take the jolt of the laurel's attack. Perhaps my sudden appearance had disoriented the beast, or shaken its own marvelous instincts, because it must have uttered its killing cry an instant too soon, or perhaps my muscles and nerves responded to my will more rapidly than it had anticipated. When 20 feet away, the great bounding beast, fangs bared, leapt for its prey. It encountered instead only the slender needle of my spear, set like a stake upon the ground, braced by the half-naked body of a warrior of Korba. The spearhead disappeared from sight into the furry beast of the laurel, and the shaft of the spear began to sink into it as the weight of the animal forced it deeper into its body. I leapt from under that tawny, monstrous body, narrowly escaping the slashing of its clawed forefeet. The spear shaft snapped, and the beast fell to the earth, rolling onto its back and pawing at the air, uttering its piercing, enraged shrieks, trying to bite the tooth-like object from its body. With a convulsive shudder, the great head lolled to one side, the eyes half closed, leaving a milky slit of death between the lids. I turned to regard the individual whose life I had saved. He was now bent and crooked, like a broken, blasted shrub in his yellow shroud-like robe, the hood concealing his face. There are more of those things about, I said. You'd better come with me. It won't be safe here. The figure seemed to shrink back and grow smaller in its yellow rags. Pointing to its shadow-concealed face, it whispered, "The holy disease." That was the literal translation of Darkosis, the holy disease, or equivalently the sacred affliction. The disease is named that because it is regarded as being holy to the priest-kings. Those suffer it are regarded as consecrated to the priest-kings. Accordingly, it's regarded as heresy to shed their blood. On the other hand, the afflicted, as they are called, have little fear from their yellow man. Their disease is so highly contagious, so invariably devastating in its effects, and so feared on the planet, that even the boldest of outlaws gives them a wide berth. Accordingly, the afflicted enjoy a large amount of freedom on Gor. They are, of course, warned to stay away from the habitations of men, and if they approach too closely, they are sometimes stoned. Oddly enough, caustically, stoning an afflicted is not regarded as a violation of the priest-king's supposed injunction against shedding of their blood. As an act of charity, initiates have arranged at various places Darkosis pits, where the afflicted may involuntarily imprison themselves, to be fed with food hurled downward from the backs of passing Tarns. Once in a Darkosis pit, the afflicted are not allowed to depart. Finding this poor fellow in the Voltae, so far from the natural roots and fertile areas of Gor, I suspected he might have escaped, if that disease is impossible, from one of the pits. "What is your name?" I asked. "I am of the afflicted," said the weird, cringing figure. "The afflicted are dead. The dead are nameless." The voice was little more than a hoarse whisper. I was glad it was night, and that the hood of the man was drawn, for I had no desire to look upon the pieces of flesh that might still cling to his skull. "Did you escape from one of the Darkosis pits?" The man seemed to cringe even more. "You are safe with me," I said. I gestured to the Tarn, which was impatiently opening and closing its wings. "Hey, there are more laurels about." "The holy disease," the man protested, pointing to the hideously dark recesses of his drawn hood. "I can't leave you here to die," I said. I shivered at the thought of taking this dread creature, this whispering corpse, with me. I feared the disease, I had not feared the laurel, but I could not in conscience leave him here upon the mountains to fall prey to one beast or another. The man cackled, a thin whining noise. "I am already dead," he laughed insanely. "I am afflicted." Again the weird cackle came from the folds of the yellow shroud. "Would you like the holy disease?" He stretched out one of his hands in the darkness, as if trying to clutch my hand. I drew back my hand in horror. The thing stumbled forward, reaching for me, and fell to the ground with a tiny moaning sound. It sat upon the ground, wrapped in its yellow cremats, a mound of decay and desolation, under the 3 Gorean moons. It slowly rocked back and forth, uttering its mad little noises, as if grieving or whimpering. From perhaps a prayer sang away, I heard the frustrated roar of a laurel, probably one of the companions of the beast I had killed, puzzling about the failure of the hunt. "Get up," I said. "There is not much time." "Help me," whined the yellow mound. I stilled a shiver of disgust and extended my hand. "Take my hand. I'll help you." From the bent heap of rags there was a fellow human being. A hand reached to me, the fingers crooked, as though they might have been the claws of a chicken. Disregarding my misgivings, I slowly took the hand, to draw that unfortunate creature to its feet. To my amazement, the hand that clasped mine firmly was as solid and hardened as saddle leather. Before I realized what was happening, my arm had been jerked downward and twisted. I had been thrown upon my back at the feet of a man who leapt up and set his boot upon my throat. In his hand a warrior's sword, the point was at my breast. He laughed a mighty roaring laugh, and threw his head back, causing the hood to fall to his shoulders. I saw a massive lion-like head, with a wild long hair, and a beard as unkempt and magnificent as the crags of the Voltaire itself. This man, who seemed to leap into gigantic stature as he lifted himself into his full height, took from under his yellow robes a tarn whistle, and blew a long, shrill note. Almost instantly the whistle had been answered by other whistles, responding from a dozen places in the nearby mountains. Within a minute the air was filled with the beating of wings, as some 100 wild Tarnsmen brought their birds down upon us. "I am Marlenus, Ubar of Ar," spoke the man.